YouTube.
What's up, YouTube podcast listeners?
And everyone on Instagram, Tumblr, and Facebook. I'm SK.
I'm Nay.
And we're the Dykeologists. And we have a special treat for you today before we get going, which is two of our oldest want to say a quick hello. They're waiting out in the hall. So quickly. Children, come forward. Come forward, children. All right.
Hello.
You're in.
Hello.
You gotta
go
more.
over there. Can you see yourself?
No.
Oh no! Come back.
Back it up into your brothers. Yeah.
All right.
That's
so
one.
That's Alexi, and this
that's
is
Art
over here.
Say hi, everyone.
Hi.
Okay, and now they're nicely gonna go away.
Yeah,
Okay, bye,
good.
children.
LeBron James.
Okay. All right.
Whew.
Parenting, always amazing. In today's episode 6, we are going to tackle the issue of transphobia in our communities and mainstream society. I feel especially incensed around this because Dr. Rachel McKinnon has been brutally attacked on Twitter by various TERFs, which are trans, exclusionary, radical feminists. And our favorite person, Sophie LaBelle, has also been attacked by transphobes and death threats and various other things that makes her life difficult. And so I wanted to make a video with Nay regarding what is going on, right?
What is going on?
What is going on? What is going on? And what's going on is a lot of injustice that the transgender community is facing. And just this morning, Brighton Beach had their first Pride. Little shout out for that event.
They got Brighton Beach
and we
Pride.
couldn't go because it rained and it's a lot to just drag 3 wet children through the rain for Pride. But we were
definitely there
in spirit. And so, on that note, and just to kind of break down some stereotypes, I really wanted to talk about why there is so much transphobia against transgender people in this society, and that's something that we need to eradicate. No debate about it, all right? So the first thing I think that I wanted to talk about is how each of us kind of first got introduced to the term transgender or met, our first transgender friends or anything like that. Because I think a lot of people don't understand, like, how long it takes to unlearn a lot of the transphobia or a lot of misinformation that you had in your life regarding folks that are trans. So when was your first encounter with someone who was trans or transgender scholarship, topics, anything in the articles, news?
I don't really know, actually. I think that, growing up and, like, even into my adult years, I really hadn't, to my knowledge, interacted with anyone who was trans, and it wasn't something that, like, within my, my environment that I was really privy to.
And that's one of those things people think, that, like, no one around me is trans, but actually that's not true. Like, lots of folks around you are trans, they're just not feeling safe and open or welcomed enough to tell you that they're trans or to name something that they're feeling that may not be in line with what they learned so far. So, of course, all of you out there have met transgender people and have interacted, dated, and fallen in love with transgender people, trans kids, trans youth, trans teachers. We are legion, and we are everywhere.
Legion.
And we are spreading like a beautiful rainbow. So then, did you...
So, I mean, I really was introduced to a lot of, the information after we met, because, like I said, I wasn't really exposed as much as I thought, right?
And what did you think?
Even when you told me you were trans, right? And I was like, oh. But, like...
It's hard to work through some of those ideas.
Because, people have their own ideas of what things are supposed to be and what, certain people are supposed to look like and be like. And, so it's like, you feel that, you see in the media what the media says trans people are like.
Which is what?
And, they
are usually who?
They are usually, they say, like, I don't know, like, they're usually, to me, or how they're, not to me, but how they're perceived, is just like men in dresses, right? It's not something that, media really takes seriously, that they really, portray out there as a serious issue and a serious topic. A lot of, recent trans deaths, really
don't get coverage.
Right. Not only don't get coverage, but then when they do get coverage, they either dead name the person or they make it just seem like, oh, like it was okay, this person died because they're just like this deviant part of society. Time out. We got a time out.
A small pause because you used a great term, which is dead name. And for those of you who don't know, dead naming a trans person means using a name with which they no longer, or if ever, identify. It's something that they were assigned at birth, kind of like the gender they no longer feel or never felt in the first place. And to use a dead name or to dead name a trans person is a kind of violence because it exposes them and places them in danger and basically follows along with what other transphobic actions do to them in the first place.
Right.
So when there's coverage of someone who's already been murdered for the fact that they're trans and you dead name that person, you erase who they are just like they were erased, by the act of that kind of homicide. It is a last of exactly of disrespect and to further, kind of humiliate that person. So do not participate in the act of dead naming. It is an incredibly hostile act and we take that very seriously. So for me, when I think back, growing up in Brooklyn, right, thinking there were just two genders, thinking that bisexual meant you were into those two genders, I didn't think about things like queer people or like asexual folks or trans folks, and I didn't know the terminology until I entered New York University, and in the LGBTQ office, we had exposure to folks who were trans and non-binary, and all of that was really eye-opening for me, and I think I tell this story to my students. It's important to mention that when I first met a trans woman who is a close friend of mine to this day, I disregarded the kinds of things she told me, and when she very nicely explained to me that I shouldn't interact with her in a certain way because it just kind of disrespects her trans identity, I just kind of said, but you're not really a woman the way that I'm really a woman, which I think everything in my history is like a karmic slap in the ass, because just a few years after that I couldn't figure out why I'm a woman myself. And so when I was positioning my biological components against this trans woman's identity, in a couple of years that all fell apart for me as having to mean a gender. And of course biology isn't gender, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So to this day I thank her for pointing that out for me and for starting me on a journey that helped me understand that the gender binary is an incredibly harmful concept. And of course now as a women's studies professor and scholar and educator, I have so much more information for why that is. But in case you don't know, the reason we have a lot of transphobia going on is because people really think that folks are out there as men and as women, and nobody really questions why that is, and it's simply not true. And it's one of those glass houses that if you start breaking, throwing rocks at it, it's very easily broken down, because let's just even think about how it's based on the thing called the sex binary, where people think men and women exist because males and females exist. But if you actually listen to biologists, if you actually listen to scientists, medical professionals, or us as scholars, you'll know that sex is not a binary thing either. There isn't just males and females. It's sort of a spectrum, and while some people do fall into what may be classified as male and what may be classified as female, many people do not.
Which is very arbitrary to begin with.
Well, it's rather arbitrary, because even if there are certain biological characteristics you can group, why do it and why assign value to it? And the reason why we know it matters to us is because when it comes to people who are intersex, who are born not easily classified into what we say is male and female, then we enact a grave injustice against them too. We really mutilate and abuse their bodies. We lie to their families. We have professionals that are ill-prepared to address any of these issues, and if you don't know about this, you should follow the group Inter/Act on Facebook just to kind of keep yourself updated. For example, Portugal just recently announced that intersex surgeries are to be no more, following Malta's example. So that's two countries that on a federal level said, and put forward that is a huge human rights violation, which I think the UN has done anyway. So when you think about why we abuse and mutilate intersex people, we remember that it's incredibly important for people to maintain a very rigid sex binary and then put on that, or through it, as we do in academia, put through it a gender binary. But why should we maintain a gender binary? Like, for whose benefit, right? You should always ask yourself, if something is that serious for people, why? And the reason is because without a gender binary that's got two genders, that's got a hierarchy between genders where men are held as superior to women, a lot of other social organization will fall apart, okay, by the wayside, because you then cannot. And that's why we as feminists say there is no excuse for maintaining that kind of inferiority in society, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to say. So to review...
Well, when were you, did you say when you first met your first
trans
person?
friend?
Oh, was that the friend that you said that you're still friends with now?
Yes, of course. And now I'm friends with many trans people because they are magic, and
our daughter is trans,
and I'm transgender myself. And you know, just to that note, I think a lot of people disregard when people who are agender or non-binary or anything like that say they're trans because of that narrative that you mentioned, which is that they have to be trans women or someone you disregard and say is a man in a dress. So the reason why Sophie is attacked, why Rachel is attacked, and I'm not as attacked, is because they
perceive you.
They are the sensationalized, you know, version of what a trans person should be and who we should attack. But if someone like me is talking and you just disregard that I'm part of the trans community because the narrative doesn't fit, then you're not going to go at me as hard. And also because a lot of these TERFs, a lot of these, again, I'm not going to call them feminists because they're not. So I think we're going with Rachel's asshats or ATACs. I don't remember what the new acronym was for renaming their trans antagonism, but you know, the reason
why is it so serious?
I just want to say that they're actually lesbians, and because we're lesbians, this makes it very difficult to align ourselves with any of those people. And so you need to remember that lesbians are not a monolith, and that a lot of us are trans or agender or non-binary. And I think there's less of us than cisgender lesbians who are running their mouths, right? Yeah. But it's very important for us to speak out against this kind of cis-sexism, essentially, saying that cisgender people have a claim to some kind of power in society because of the body parts that they were born with. Like, you didn't do anything
to get any
of the body parts. It's like a little bit of a genetic Russian roulette, you know, and it's not something you achieved, so you cannot actually live as an adult to this day and talk about how you're a real woman because of some biological part that you possess, right? Okay. What were you asking me?
I was asking, I forgot.
Why it's so serious,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah. I was saying, like, what, like, really, like, I know, you know, like, we have jobs, and we have children, and I'm sure some of these other folks do too, and, like, why is it your life's mission to, like, go on these social media outlets and, like, harass people, like, really, like, get your life. It's really not your wheelhouse to be, like, dishing shit out to people, and, like, it's just ridiculous, basically.
Yeah, and it's not a joke where you say, well, why don't we get off Twitter, too? Because there's, like, actual campaigns affecting people's lives and careers that these folks are involved in. So while they're not very bright as far as lampshades go, and they're not very coordinated, you know,
they still can cause
still incredibly harmful
people,
because of claims of pedophilia, which is just false, and because of claims of, you know, grooming young children, which is false. Now, our daughter is trans, and that was her decision, and she came out as trans a year ago, and we raised our children without gender norms here in this household, but this household is not the only place where they live and grow up and interact with, so they can still figure out which particular gender identity they want to carry in the world. And she said she's a trans girl, and she said that because she knows what a trans girl is and what trans children are, and because we took her to Trans Health, which is like one of our favorite events to attend for free in Philadelphia. So if you can make it there, if you
Trans Health,
if you have any kind of, you know, thoughts about your own gender identity or that of your children, it's a great place to go and explore some of that, okay? Because you don't have to pick up the language, but it's good to be with people who understand that the sex and gender binaries as they are set up in the West are very limited constructs, very harmful, very dangerous constructs, and that there are people who are going to support you. Now, I feel like Rachel got a lot of crap for saying what we said in our own Mother's Day video, which is that children and young teens and young adults need to absolutely stand up to their families that are transphobic and homophobic and not accepting. And as soon as they are able to do so, you know, as soon as they are able to leave the house and financially sustain themselves, they should absolutely, for their self-care, say kind of see you later to all of the transphobes and homophobes in their family. And the glitter aunt of which she spoke exists here in us too, and the reason why cisgender people don't understand this is because they don't know about queer kinship, they don't know about queer families, they don't know about how many of us form bonds with other queer people, older, younger, similar ages to us, so that they can be our family instead, how we reconceptualize family, not to be blood ties, but social ties and friendships, you know, and sort of kinship in that sense. So as usual, TERFs prove themselves to be rather unimaginative, not the brightest shades out there, okay? They lack imagination, they lack compassion, and you know, in their loosely coordinated attacks against trans people, mostly trans women, they prove themselves to be transphobic and violent and dangerous. And if anybody needs to be, you know, tweeted at Interpol or whatever, it's those people, because they are engaging in harassment. And if anybody needs to be fired, it's those people. If only Twitter cared to actually hold people accountable for the kind of vile things they do against LGBT people. Right.
Instead of getting all the LGBT people flagged for bullshit and deactivating their, you know, usernames and all that kind of mess. So
that's right, like it happened with the Men Are Trash hashtag or the Men Are Trash album or anything like that, which Facebook deemed hate speech, but every other kind of violent, sexist, and sexualized thing can take place against women and trans people on Facebook, and it does not, you know,
free speech.
Violate their community standards. So on that note, I really want you to think about what kind of community standards you want to propagate out there in your social media and in your real lives. And until you get your life together, your children will come to us, and they will find family with us. And that's not about grooming, that's about providing humans with human families, okay, and love and compassion. And I just don't know how else to get it through your heads, you know, because you need a significant re-education. So there we go, talking against transphobia here on the Dykeologists, and we'll see you next time.
Later.